Hello, this is Taha.
This is Anaina.
This is Movie Masala.
And we're here to yap at you about films we watched recently.
And today we're doing The Surfer.
I told you to wait up in the car park.
I want my surfboard.
Okay. I'm sure it's just a mix-up. Is it one of these?
Dude, that's my board, and I want it back.
So basically, I just was like, oh, new Nicolas Cage movie. I need to watch it.
Good God, that man is the goofiest something on the planet, but he is goofy as fuck.
The thing with Nicolas Cage is, I think you can debate his acting talent. I think one thing you cannot argue with me is this man gives 110% for every single role he does. He'll pick bad scripts, he'll pick bad films, but he will commit. He has never not committed to a role. I can say that, right? I have never seen a half-ass Nicolas Cage performance.
Fair.
Yeah. So I went into what this film, and very basically, this film just boils down to Nicolas Cage torture porn. If you just want to see Nicolas Cage get degraded again and again and again and again and again, amazing film to watch.
I mean, I'm sure there's an audience for that.
Honestly. Okay. So basically, Nicolas Cage plays the surfer. He's not given an actual name in the film or in the script or like in the credits. He just is called the surfer, who is this Australian born but American guy because he moved to America, has an American accent, which I think that might be the only place where I'm like, I think they didn't want Nicolas Cage to do an Australian accent. Not because I don't think he would have not tried. I think they purposely just put that part in because they did not want Nicolas Cage to do an Australian accent. But also it does play into the film because this film is set in Australia. It is entirely dominated by an Australian cast in like not a single other person aside from Nicolas Cage in the film is not an Australian, right? And the basic film is Nicolas Cage is coming back to this place and he wants to buy his childhood house back, right? He lives near this beach. He wants to buy that house back, but there's a lot of localism about like if you don't live here, you don't surf here, even though it's a public beach. And basically the localism is enforced with violent means, right? So the guys do not let him be. And it is him becoming increasingly desperate. Like at first he has to contact his broker because he needs a bit more money to make sure he can buy the house so nobody else takes it. That leads him to be like, okay, I'll stay here for longer than I need to. I'll camp here overnight so he can call me back and I can immediately get it. And over time, things become worse and worse and worse. Like he uses his jacket, he loses his glasses, he loses his coffee on his shirt. His hair becomes more decrepit. He loses his watch. Things become worse and worse. And that is where the torture porn comes in, where at a point you see Nicolas Cage not only drinking basically like dirty tap water, but drinking water from the ground. Like going on his knees, slurping water that's been on the ground. The things that this made me see Nicolas Cage do, I was just like, this is hard to bear.
Do the writers have like a degradation kink or something?
I don't know. I don't know if Thomas Martin, who's the writer of this, Nicolas Cage, like hurt his family in any way. But it is like so specifically hurting him in such a upsetting to watch way. But anyways, like after a point, he just basically loses everything. And this was at the point where I was like, why is this film going on? There's like even his main motivation, which was like, oh, his broker will call him even if he's lost his phone, because he was able to call the broker on like a payphone, but the payphone got destroyed. He can't call you even if he wanted to. Why are you here? And I understand that feels into the themes of the film of like his obsession with this and unable to grasp it. And also with just like not being able born there and localism. And I think which is come to the end theme of like toxic masculinity, which I'll come to how it enforces that, right? But at this point, the film is also continuously playing with like these psychological trippy images. You see him on the beach. You like see like things happen and you're not sure if they're actually happening and you're not sure if he's seeing them or like these are just cutaways or like random like imagery added to the film. And you at this point, as he's becoming more decrepit, basically, you think he's going to become basically this old man that you see at the start of the film that kind of disappears later. I'm like, oh, okay, this is he's basically gonna become this man, and it's like gonna be like this, like more surrealist, absurdist kind of way. That doesn't happen. That does not happen. And this is where I was like, okay, now I've connected his obsession and like it's making him driving into. No, what happens is he is basically inducted into these guys because he gets pissed enough that he just fully beats one of them and is able to like survive. And here I got also confused because of like, if this is about toxicity, if this is about like localism, like, you know, toxic masculinity, then him getting inducted, while makes sense to me, I'll come again. I was like, how it further. It's like, well, what is the point really to say? Is that you have to be part of them to actively succeed? Is that the point you're making? Which is might not be a good point, but it is a point, I guess. But that also I get confused by, because the leader of the like group of locals, he dies at the end because the old man comes back and shoots him. I'm like, I just didn't understand what was the actual theme, or like, how are you trying to tie this together? I am confused.
I fucking hate it when films bring something up and then don't follow through.
It was just like someone had a great idea, like a good idea, and had a theme that ran through it well. But then halfway through was like forgot the theme and just focused on what made the better ending, even though that doesn't necessarily. Maybe I'm stupid. Maybe this works very well and you can. But I am like, I don't see how it follows through. I don't see what you're trying to say, Vesty. I'm confused. Also, another thing was, it gets much quicker in the last 20 minutes. But for a lot of this film, after like from the last 30 minutes, it's very slow and it's very arduous to sit through. And like, I'm not upset at like the quote unquote, again, torture porn that happens for Nicolas Cage. I am just very much so like, it feels repetitive. It feels like, I know it's building, but it's so slow and it's just so like no new information is being added. So example, after he loses his jacket, right? You're like, okay, I see where he's going. He's becoming that person. Nothing new happens. We're like, I have gained a new insight into this character, or like something has really pushed the. It's just you see that same thing happen again and again and again and just slowly circle into that drain. And you're like, that's where I think something becomes boring, is when the audience starts to feel they've already solved it and they're just waiting on you to get to the point.
I think like that's just bad writing. If an audience has guessed something before, like in a kind of guessing game kind of film, but then you make them play the long game to get to it, then it's just like, well, why am I here?
Exactly. Like, again, like I admit that the ending didn't go where I thought it would. And that's good. That's actually not the bad part. It's just, you made me think clearly something was happening. And there's no point in just repeating the setup to like a shock or awe thing. Because while that setup is happening, I'm just going to be like dull. Like, and again, it's like, sure, at the end, I'm like, okay, all of this makes sense to me. But while I was happening, I was not having a great time. And you need that. Those are like, you can't justify like dullness by being like, it pays off at the end. Because at that point, you were not enjoying it, which you did feel bad about for those 30 minutes.
That time it was relief. At that point, it's relief. It's like, oh, thank God this film wasn't as dull as I thought it was.
Yeah. But again, I think what does help it a bit is the overall visuals and trippiness, the way it's shot, some of the close-ups, just some of the heat. Like, the film really sells you on the heat of this Australian beach and how like it is actively making Nicolas Cage crazy, which again, also Nicolas Cage sells you on how he's going crazy. Because again, if someone can play crazy, it is goddamn Nicolas Cage.
Yeah.
But yeah, so, you know, like, credit to Reddit Latzik, who's the cinematographer, and Tony Cranston, who's the editor, because I think they do a good job in making the visuals and that trippiness sell really well. And I think it sold genuinely that well that when I left, I felt myself in a haze of like the film had induced. And I think that is kind of one of its like most like saving graces or like best features, where it doesn't make it a bad movie, which is that you do have this thing of like the way it sells the imagery and how it does it, and how also just how it humiliates Nicolas Cage. I keep coming back to this. You are left with this sense of like, I kind of feel that sense. I don't know how much time has passed. I feel this sense of like haze and like hysteria kind of just wash over the film. Like the film is coated in it. I think that is like one of its better parts, very honest. But yeah, it's absorbing sometimes, but it's also sometimes dull. And it's a Nicolas Cage film. If you like Nicolas Cage, he's Nicolas Caging.
I was going to say the exact same thing. It was like, in other words, it's a Nicolas Cage film.
If you like Nicolas Cage, he's very Nicolas Caging. He's Nicolas Caging hard, you know? He has had better performances. But again,
As long as he's having
Yeah.
fun.
I think this man has never showed up to set not wanting to commit. He has never shown up to set being like, I am not 100% here for this. Never has half-assed anything. And honestly, mad respect for him for that.
For sure.
But yeah, so those are our thoughts. Thank you for tuning in. This podcast is produced solely by us with musical assets from Pixabay. See you again next time.